So that gets down to the study objectives are to use social science tools at priority sites to measure carrying capacity indicators and estimate standards at which impacts become acceptable, to determine if current conditions are exceeding those standards, and if so, what do we do about them, and also the extent to which experiences of users, satisfaction, conflicts among stakeholders are occurring, to estimate the extent to which conflicts exist among activity groups, to measure support and opposition to strategies for managing impacts such as zoning or education, and how situational factors such as perceived crowding, choral health, I'll show an example of that in a second, differentially influence these evaluations, compare evaluations among sites, activities, stakeholders, and to use data to inform management, allow field personnel down the road to estimate and monitor recreation impacts. So we have 3 study sites currently: Pupukea Marine Life Conservation District, Kahe Point Beach Park, Waikiki Diamond Head Fisheries Management Area. We'll be doing some participant observation, although a lot of that data currently exists with lifeguards. They have a lot of that at these sites. But the main thing is on-site surveys of unguided, guided, shore-based, boat-based recreationalists, the people using these sites. Also subsistence and recreational anglers will be using the sites, operators and guides with trips to the sites where applicable. We'll be conducting these surveys daily for 4 weeks in March and July 2007, 2 weeks in March, 2 weeks in July. I've got down 2 researchers per site. It'll actually be closer to 3 or 4. There'll be myself and Dr. Tynan and a number of our graduate students, and also students from the Marine Option Program at the University of Hawaii. There'll be a systematic random sample, and the sample size will be at minimum about 400 per site to generalize to the population at a 95% confidence interval, plus or minus 5%. So we're looking at a sample size of around 1,200. So just to give you a little bit more hands-on as to what we're talking about, there's a number of ways to measure social carrying capacity. One way that's being mainly used in the literature is like an open format, where you simply ask people to write in a number. What is an acceptable number of other people to see while you're on this beach? It's acceptable to see blank number. Or closed, where people can just circle the number. The problem with these kind of approaches is it's very difficult to imagine what conditions would look like. What does 2,000 people look like? All right. In Pupukea, some of the use levels are around 2,000 or so at times. And I've got Waikiki Beach here. What's the difference between 2,000 and 2,050? It's kind of hard to visualize these things. It's also very difficult for users to provide an exact number in very high use areas. So some cutting edge technology that's being used by myself, and it's also being used heavily in the U.S. National Park System, is image capture technology, where you show photographs in a survey. And people rate the acceptance of these conditions usually on a scale of -3 to +3 or -4 to +4, where you show images like this where there's no one, and then you plop in a few, and then you plop in a few more, and then you plop in a few more. All right. So, and this can be measured quantitatively. Here's the acceptance on the vertical axis, and on the horizontal axis you can see these are the different photographs, so increasing number of people. This is just a hypothetical example, and you can plot the means there, and obviously, not surprisingly, no people is what a lot of people prefer. This is the optimal condition. Not really, it doesn't make much sense to set a carrying capacity standard at that. In other words, you ban everyone from an area. It doesn't make a lot of sense. Often this is used as the standard of quality. So the indicator in this condition would be crowding or encounters. This would be the standard. Range of acceptable conditions. Another interesting point is this crystallization, usually measured by the standard deviation across all points on the curve. That's the amount of consensus as to whether these conditions are acceptable or unacceptable. And then intensity and importance, which is a measure of the distance from the point to the neutral point added up over all of them, which shows how important is the indicator, like crowding, to users. If there's a curve that sort of starts here and just floats along the neutral point, generally it's an indicator that people could give a rip about. So, how do we measure recreation conflict? Often it's a constructed variable for each activity, where you ask people to evaluate multiple conflict events like other users being rude or discourteous, other users recreating too close to you, people not looking where they're going. That's a big one for snorkeling. People being noisy, rowdy, that kind of stuff. I don't know if you can see this picture, but you got a surfer here and then a jet skier, but the jet skier is actually there. He's given up on his jet ski and it's about to land smack on the surfer. But so you ask 2 different questions for each of these events. The frequency of observing event, how often does this happen to you? And also, do you care? Is this a problem for you? And then you can do a number of bivariate and multivariate analyses to segment into these different groups: one-way, two-way, in-group, out-group, interpersonal, and social values, which we talked about. You can use multivariate approaches like cluster analysis to segment conflict groups. The last way to analyze recreation management is we talked about that acceptance of management differs depending on current conditions. We're going to be using conjoint analysis in this to address this, kind of like stated choice. Although stated choice modeling basically says choose this scenario or this scenario, it doesn't allow you to evaluate a number of different items for each scenario. What it is you show in the survey a number of different scenarios to represent various conditions. I'll give you an example of that on the next slide. These scenarios consist of situational factors, might be use level, coral health, fish abundance, whatever. I just threw in a number of them. And then impact levels for each factor, so low crowding, high, medium crowding, high crowding, use level, whatever. The problem is for this example where I have 3 different situational factors and 3 impact levels for each, there's the possibility of having 27 different combinations. You don't really want to throw 27 different scenarios into a survey. It would be a huge survey. So you can use an orthogonal fractional factorial design, which will get out a subset of scenarios in the survey. Usually it's about 5 to 8. And then following each of these scenarios, users can rate the acceptance of different management actions, such as zoning, quota, permits, fees. The subset, the 5 or 8, is able to predict what the responses will be for all of those 27 different possible scenarios. And the utility values that come out of it, similar to beta weights out of regression, show that the relative importance of each factor. So is it use level that's really driving acceptance of different management actions, or is it something else? And so how those things differentially influence acceptance of each action. So here's an example where this isn't the example we're going to be using in the survey. We have yet to design that, where you might have use level is high, coral health is healthy, and fish abundance is high. Now remember, this is perceptual. It's based on people's perceptions. So you might have another condition where use level might be 0. In other words, it's a solitude experience, but the reef looks like crap and there's no fish. All right. So you have very different types of scenarios, and then you ask people, if these conditions were common, how unacceptable or acceptable would it be for managers to take the following actions? And then we just put in a number of actions here, like do nothing, educate users about proper reef etiquette, restrict number of snorkelers, or close the area to all recreational use. Those are just some examples. We have yet to fine-tune exactly what those items are, and people can rate them. So there'll be about 3 or 4 or 5 of these in the survey. So my last slide is the utility of the study. First of all, it addresses a number of research priorities. It's in line with the research priorities here of HCRI, and also the recreational impact of reefs for the local action strategy, which I'm now a member of. We provide quantitative data using rigorous and cutting-edge methodology, conjoint, etc., that provides a scientific foundation for informing current management. We feel that the social science approach here complements a lot of the existing biological and ecological research that has been done on the islands. And what's important to emphasize here is managers are always reluctant to make decisions without biological information, but they should just be equally reluctant to make decisions without information from stakeholders. First, most management actions such as zoning, stuff like that, usually don't go over very well if the users of an area don't really like that idea. And also, decisions can end up being reversed in court. To give you an example, Yellowstone National Park, there was a lot of biological research that went into the reintroduction of wolves into the park. There was not a lot of social science research done with the landowners and the cattle herders and all that around, the ranchers around the park. Now, because the wolves have they don't know the park boundaries, they've gone outside the park boundaries, they go in and out, they're killing some of these cattle. There's now lawsuits against the national park over some of these kind of things. The study also allows comparison among sites, activities, stakeholders. The methods are repeatable to detect change over time, and the goal is to hopefully launch future innovative and collaborative research opportunities in Hawaii. So with that, I will address any questions.